All right, ever feel like your brain's playing a never-ending game of what if?
Yeah.
Like right before a big presentation, you've prepped for hours, but then, bam, your brain decides it's time for a little, what's the worst that could happen? Spiral.
Oh, yeah, totally.
That, my friends, is the overthinking monster rearing its head. And that's exactly what we're diving deep into today. We're on a mission to understand this tricky habit and, more importantly, how to break free. Our guide. A fascinating podcast episode all about mindfulness and self-care. They described overthinking as getting stuck in this whirlwind of negative thoughts, worries, and those dreaded what-ifs. It's like that broken record of should-have, could-have, wouldies playing on repeat in your mind, you know?
Like that hamster wheel we've all been on, running and running, but not actually getting anywhere. And just like that hamster, it can really wear you down mentally and emotionally.
Absolutely. And it's more than just a few passing thoughts. It's this cycle that can really take over. So why does our brain do this to us? Why?
Well, the podcast suggested it's actually a type of coping mechanism, especially for those who've experienced trauma or intense stress. You see, our brains are hardwired for survival, constantly scanning for potential threats, even if they're not really there.
So it's like our internal alarm system is stuck on high alert.
Exactly. And in this attempt to regain a sense of control over the unknown, we overthink. We try to anticipate every possible outcome, even if it's totally out of our hands.
Right, so our brain thinks it's helping us prepare, but it ends up making us more anxious. How do we escape this mental maze? This podcast episode had some really interesting strategies. One that caught my eye was mindfulness meditation. I've tried meditation before, but never really connected it to overthinking.
It's about changing your relationship with your thoughts. Instead of trying to completely silence that mental chatter, mindfulness encourages you to just observe those thoughts and feelings without judgment.
So it's not about stopping the thoughts, but more about how we react to them.
You got it. Imagine your thoughts are like clouds just drifting across the sky. You see them, but you don't get swept up in them. You observe them without judgment, letting them pass.
Okay, I like that. So we can actually create some space between ourselves and those overthinking spirals.
Exactly. And the podcast also mentioned grounding techniques.
Routing techniques, those sound interesting.
They're all about reconnecting with your senses, bringing you back to the present moment. For example, you might focus on the feeling of your feet on the ground, the sound of your breath, or even the taste of a warm drink.
It's like hitting the pause button on all the mental chaos, reminding yourself, hey, I'm here, I'm safe.
Exactly. Simple but powerful techniques to quiet those racing thoughts.
And the best part is, you can use them anytime, anywhere. Speaking of taming the overthinking beast, the podcast talked about a strategy I haven't fully embraced, journaling.
Oh, me neither.
I'm more of a keep it all in my head kind of person, but I have a feeling that might be part of the problem.
Right. I used to think journaling was just for recording daily events. But it can be so therapeutic. And you know what? It's not about perfect grammar or anything like that. It's about free writing. Just letting all those jumbled thoughts and feelings pour out onto the page.
So it's like a brain decluttering session,
Yeah.
but on paper.
Exactly. And the best part is there's no judgment, no censorship. It's just for you.
It's like giving those thoughts an escape route instead of letting them just bounce around in our heads. And, you know, this podcast episode mentioned something else that I think fits in really well here. Physical activity.
Definitely. When it comes to calming the mind, exercise can be really powerful, you know?
Yeah, I'm sure we've all felt that sense of mental clarity after a good workout or even just a walk outside. It's like hitting the reset button.
Yeah, it is.
I know for me, even a little bit of yoga can make a huge difference when I feel myself getting stuck in my own head. But how does moving our bodies actually help quiet those thoughts?
Well, for one thing, exercise releases endorphins, which can instantly improve your mood. But it's more than that. When you're active, your focus shifts to your body, your breath, your movements. It gives your mind a break from all those thought loops.
It pulls you into the present moment.
Exactly. And it doesn't have to be anything super intense. The podcast even mentioned that gentle movement, like stretching or dancing, can be really beneficial. It's about finding what feels good for you and helps you reconnect with your body.
You know, we've been talking about quieting that inner critic, but what do we even mean by that?
Yes, the inner critic, that voice that loves to remind us of all our flaws and mistakes. The one that says, you're not good enough, or you'll never be able to do that.
Ugh, the worst, right?
The worst.
It can be so loud and persistent. Makes it really hard to believe in ourselves sometimes.
Absolutely. And you know, the podcast really emphasized that self-criticism, even though it might feel like it's pushing us to be better, can actually be really counterproductive.
So how do we even begin to challenge this inner critic? What did the podcast suggest?
one of the most powerful things it can do is cultivate self-compassion.
Self-compassion.
Yes.
So that's not about letting ourselves off the hook for things or ignoring areas where we want to grow, right?
Not at all. It's about recognizing that we are all human, we're all perfectly imperfect, and we're worthy of kindness and understanding, especially from ourselves.
So it's about treating ourselves with the same care and compassion we would offer a close friend.
Exactly. Instead of beating ourselves up for mistakes, we can approach those situations with gentleness and understanding.
That's a powerful shift in perspective.
It is.
It's like we're finally on our own team
Yeah.
instead of our own worst enemy.
Exactly. And in addition to self-compassion, the podcast also talked about directly challenging those negative thoughts.
Okay, so we're not just letting those thoughts run wild, we're actually questioning them.
Yes. It's about recognizing those negative thought patterns and consciously reframing them in a more positive and realistic way. For example, let's say you make a mistake at work, and that inner critic chimes in with, "See, I told you you're not good enough. You're going to get fired."
Oh, I've been there.
Haven't we all?
It's crazy how quickly those thoughts can spiral.
Right. But instead of getting swept up in all that negativity, you can choose to challenge it. You might say to yourself, okay, I made a mistake, but everyone makes mistakes. It doesn't mean I'm incompetent or that I'm going to get fired. It just means I'm human and I'm still learning.
So it's about replacing those harsh self-judgments with a more compassionate inner dialogue.
Exactly. And the more you practice reframing those thoughts, the easier it becomes to quiet that inner critic.
It's like we're giving ourselves permission to be human,
Yeah.
mistakes and all.
Exactly. And this whole idea of self-compassion, it ties into another key takeaway from this podcast, staying present. They talked about how so much of our overthinking comes from either dwelling on the past, which we can't change, or worrying about the future, which we can't control.
Right, it's like our minds become these time-traveling machines.
Right.
And not in a fun way, more like a bumpy, anxiety-filled roller coaster we can't get off.
That's a great way to put it. The podcast really stressed that the only moment we truly have power over is the present moment. And by really being present in the here and now, we can start to loosen the grip of those what ifs and if onlys that fuel overthinking.
So how do we actually become more present? It sounds simple, but it's not always easy.
Right. The podcast had some good advice on that. They recommended starting small. Instead of trying to change everything at once, just pick one or two of these strategies that resonate with you and try incorporating them into your day-to-day life.
I like that. It takes the pressure off.
Definitely. It's not about being perfect. It's about taking small steps consistently.
And remember, you don't have to do this alone. The podcast talked about how important it is to seek support, whether that's from a friend, family member, or even a therapist. Sometimes just having someone to listen can make a world of difference. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into taming the overthinking monster, what is one small step you can take today to quiet your mind and be a little kinder to yourself?
Maybe take 5 minutes to just breathe. Or write down 3 things you're grateful for. Or even just notice the feeling of the sun on your skin. Whatever it is, choose to be present in this moment.
That's great advice. Thanks for diving deep with us today.
Of course, it was my pleasure.
And to all our listeners, thanks for tuning in. We'll catch you next time.